you know where they saw this piece of singlism come out fervently in the last 2 years was during COVID. Because there were more exceptions made for people who were working at home with children.
Is the thought of being imperfect keeping you from taking action? Welcome to Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans. Each week, we give you real-life stories and thought-provoking research that inspires your soul to live a more fulfilled life through your own actions. From the heart of Calgary, Canada, here are your hosts, award-winning coaches, Christopher Lawrence and Kyle Kalu.
Good morning to you, my dear perpetually single friend, Kyle.
Wow. How we're starting. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and anyone in between or what have you. Welcome to another exciting week of Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans. And that's kind of what we are. So can we just go back to how you started today's podcast?
Well, yeah, I want to talk about this, girl, because you are single and you've been single for a long time. Like your whole life. You've had 2 long-term relationships, both of which were just absolutely miserable for the people involved in them.
I was the best they ever had. Like, honestly, are you kidding me? I was the
So are
best
they dead now, or?
No, they just can't have good other. Do you know what's actually going on? I just completed 13 years of being single.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
Oh, goodness. You know what? Single looks good on you.
Oh man. Okay, is everyone ready for today?
I feel sorry for your mother.
Listen, it was my mother's fault. She warned me and she told me that no one will ever be good enough. She warned me to be independent. She told me to do everything myself. So I'm gonna blame my mom on this one, even though that might be a little bit of a stretch, but still.
You know what? I'm going to make her listen to this and then we're going to come for you because why you got her in this mix up and blender.
Oh, your patois is showing.
Yes.
Patois is showing.
For those that don't know, Kyle, explain what patois is and then tell them what I just said to you.
Okay. Patois is it's a Jamaican, dialect-ish, slang-ish. I think it's its own language, because it has the structure of all other languages. But anyway, it's interesting how people usually say, it's broken English, or they'll hear, it's curl for something. It's always, interpreted differently. And what I think is interesting about even that phrase about being broken English, so Latin words and English words are derived from Latin, right? But Jamaican patois dialect is broken, right? Like, what is that about? But anyway, so it's a Jamaican dialect that's commonly spoken in Jamaica. Patois, we usually refer to it as. And what Christopher just said when he says, being caught in mix-up and blender. Here's the thing about patois. It's such a very descriptive and funny word because it's like metaphors and words jammed together almost. So the direct translation, when you say to someone, I'm not into any mix up and blender, you're saying I'm not into anything that's mixed, like it's mixed with different things, but they have to add the descriptive thing about a blender. Because when you look at a blender, what does it do? It mixes things up, right?
So if you're in a mix up and blender, then basically you're in a bunch of drama. You're caught up in this mix up in this blender. Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
It's so sometimes I have to laugh at it, but anyway, speaking and mixing.
Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we'll teach you what mad puss piss means. Oh, that one reminds me of your grandma.
Oh, she loved when you said that. Like I remember the first time you said it. We were in Banff.
We were
at the time. Yeah, we're Banff having lunch. And like most things, when you say hello and, how do you say hi? You know how to say hi. When you say hi to someone, what else comes right after?
What? Tell me now.
What? Tell me now, right? So it's like, what's up? Tell me what's happening, right? That's the direct translation. And she giggled when you said that. She's like, oh, because your pronunciation's actually pretty good, right? So which is great. And you've actually tricked my aunt a couple times because when you answered my phone, she thought it was me just by how you said it. So I thought it was great. But
no,
then
she got upset because she's like, I'm like, what? And tell me now. And she starts going off about something, and I'm like, what you butting me for? Sure. She
was like, what?
She was like, excuse me? She was not happy. It's just like, oh, you caught me off guard. Man. That was good. Yeah.
Guys, if you want to hear Christopher speak and learn more patois, please send us a comment. Let us know that would be your weekly inspired action, is to hear him speak for that. That's a given.
My imperfect patois.
To finish the conversation, and so when we were in Banff having lunch, and you said, something, you reacted to me, like your timing was impeccable. It wasn't, oh, here's a new word I learned. You deliberately said it in reference to something I said to you. I don't even know what I said to you. And you're like, you think me I drink mad puss piss? And she went off. Like she
could stop laughing.
I think we took a picture of that moment.
Oh, we have a picture of it. Yeah.
I had to take a picture of that moment because she laughed so hard. You know that laughter when your eyes are closed and you're just holding yourself and your face is literally just pulling apart in laughter. That's what she did. So
it's a good memory.
Yeah, it's an interesting slang.
So let's go back to your epic single life, because actually, okay, so I want to, no, girl, I'm like right into it now. I can't stop thinking about it. I was actually thinking about this and in the workplace, and granted, I haven't been single for some time. Now I'm entering year 10 of being in a relationship. And I was thinking about this, and actually, I think being single in the workplace is harder.
Interesting.
Than not.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us? You're a single person in the workplace, aren't you?
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting because I was remembering, because for most of my life, I have been single, I would say. I think I would honestly say for most of my life,
girl, it's not just you. It's like God, Jesus, the universe, and everybody else would say for most of your life, you've been single.
You know what?
Ladies and gentlemen, he is undateable.
And that's another story, but I want people to know it's a decision. It's a decision to be single. And I mean, and I often say to people, if you only know, it's not like it's an effort to stay single, because there's a lot of times you can get really caught up, at least from my perspective, you can get caught up in it. But I was thinking about, my career in the workforce, obviously it's a little bit different, own your own business and stuff like that. But in the workforce, like I think about when I was at McDonald's, when I was at WestJet, when I was at all these companies, there was always this hidden, sometimes there were deliberate expectations around, you had to do more, right? Like meaning, when someone says, hey, I noticed you got Christmas off, like for whatever, how the schedule may have worked or what have you, when I was doing kind of shift work, they would be like, well, I noticed you have Christmas off. Like, you're single, you can work Christmas. I mean, I've got kids and I've got a family, right? Or, hey, who wants to be on call? Because sometimes I was in a certain role that we had to be on call, like for after hours type of stuff. And it was always looked upon me to take the calls, right? To be the available person, because their rationale is, well, I have a family and I want to spend time with your family. And and for the beginning, I just did it because I'm like, I started to believe that as being single, I should be the one. That was kind of my experience with it.
It's really interesting, actually. When I was single, it was very much the same. Like I would be in a meeting and maybe Jennifer or Thomas would say, fake names, but Jennifer or Thomas would, it's like, okay, like we need someone to do this. It's got to happen tonight. There's a board meeting tomorrow, or, this is what it is. And they'd be like, oh, like my kids got soccer or, or whatever. Right. And then they'd kind of look at me with this sort of like desperate, passive aggressive look saying, Christopher, as a question, like, will you do this? Like, we know that you're single. And so I do like it's actually pretty amazing to me. I think there's a lot of unfairness in the workplace, and I think it's natural that we would do this as human beings. But actually, Kyle, there's an interesting article here that I came across. And and it's called The Many Ways Single People Are Treated Unfairly at Work, and it's by Bella DiPaolo. And so she sort of coined this term singlism. And sort of there's unfair expectation. So this comes in all sorts of, like it comes in all sorts of forms, but I think what people need to understand is like discrimination and discrimination bias and all this stuff, it exists wherever you go. Smokers get more breaks than non-smokers. Right, they do. And so it's like non-smokers should take more breaks. That's the solution to this, right? Some places in the world, although you don't get it in Canada because it would be an additional form of discrimination. Although it's kind of like, well, which way are you discriminating, right? Smokers get more breaks, but in other countries, they're giving smokers an extra day off, or sorry, non-smokers an extra day. Like someone went and calculated, this is how much time off non-smokers should get. So they get a couple of extra days or something, because that's how much smokers would take on average throughout the year in terms of breaks. And so in Canada, that would be considered a form of discrimination against a smoker, whereas in another country, it's a form of discrimination against a non-smoker if you don't give them the break, the extra time. So I think when we look at singlism, it's important to look at this both ways. But certainly, there's some really obvious things. So single people do cover for other people at work who are not single or who don't have kids or a spouse, right?
Like what I was saying, right? The whole vacation.
Exactly. So this has been shown. So here's what she says. DiPaolo says, what's interesting about this is that in the 21st century, people will ask it totally unselfconsciously and unapologetically for a single person to stay and work. And that includes the most progressive and open-minded people in the intellectual vanguard who would never in a million years see themselves as being unfair to other people. But we are doing it. Right. So it is a form of prejudice. One of the things that she suggests, Kyle, actually is replace the word in your mind. If you're not saying it out loud, replace the word single with the word gay, and then see how it lands. Yeah. It's like, well, like, hey, you're gay. Why don't you come in tonight? So my nice hetero employees can go home early. You're gay, so you don't need to be paid as much. And actually, this is one of the ways that singledom is being treated, is that they're seeing that this is suspected. It's not for sure, but there's a marriage bias where people with kids require more. And so
the replacing of the word is just for an awareness piece.
Sorry, to go back to that.
Is that what
that's exactly it. It's like it's like, if you don't think you're being unfair, replace that thought you're having about the single person with something like gay, or because you're pregnant, or because you're a woman. Replace it with something like, or because you're Black or Asian. Replace single with that, and then see if it still lands okay. But actually, they are seeing it. Or they think they're seeing it. So there's more research that needs to be done, but they think they're seeing it in pay as well, where there is a marriage and child bias, where people who have kids are sometimes getting paid more to cover home costs.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point, because I'd be curious how many people factor that in. So if you're that person, either recruiting HR or that senior leader, when you look at your team, do you factor that in? Do you say, well, this guy has more, income, or things to do other things, right? And then or this guy has 3, 4, 5 kids, do you factor that in? Or he has a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home husband, or what have you? Do you actually factor that in, or do you just look at the pay scale for the sake of the pay scale?
Well, and that's what they should be doing, but we know that sometimes it's happening, sometimes it's not. Like, there are people who argue against the gender wage gap right now, and actually there's a lot of proof in social research that suggests that the gender wage gap does not exist. But we know literally on paper, women are paid less than men. What they're attributing it to is because women leave the workforce to have children.
Right.
or
Okay.
maybe take care of a parent or whatever. When you look at the comparison, women are about where this is the argument. I'm not saying it's my argument,
Right.
okay?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
but women are actually paid fairly for their experience. So if you took a 2-year break, you would be paid the same as a woman was. But to me, that's still a gender wage gap, because the only people who can have children are women. So it doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense to look at your executives. The very few that are female are not paid the same in a lot of cases. So anyway, to me, this is the same. Like, I think I would be interested to see more research on the salary. You know where they saw this piece of singlism come out fervently in the last 2 years was during COVID, because there were more exceptions made for people who were working at home with children. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have made the exceptions. I'm not saying we shouldn't have made the exceptions, but it's like, you could see this going both ways. It's like, so should this single person get a higher bonus because they worked more? And it's like, should they work more? Like, I don't know how we make this fair. I don't know how we make it fair, but I think there is something about being conscious to it.
You know,
like,
what,
I think we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, like most things, I think, like we've been talking even from a previous podcast with Deed about, you know, our the subconscious, the biases that we do, you know, the biases we have. And I think, like most things, we're not saying these things should never happen. We're just saying, for the most part, are you even mindful of it, right? Because like I said, every time I would see a schedule before, and whatever reason, because they're usually saying, well, Kyle has worked like 4 or 5 Christmases in a row. So someone along the line says, hey, let's give him a break. But then, like clockwork, as soon as that gets posted or published, or it's aware, like 4 or 5 of those folks who have families say, hey, right? And I know I know it's not that they don't necessarily care. At least I'd like to think it's not that they don't care about me, all this other stuff. I understand from their perspective, it's like, sure, would be great for us to kind of have that together. And also travel is the other thing. I was always expected to travel away for business, right? More. I was usually asked first, hey, do you mind going to that meeting? Hey, do you mind go checking that out? Hey, right? And sometimes that could put me into issues with other people who perceive it that is either favoritism.
Agree. I was just going to say, I think that puts people who are married with children at risk for being discriminated against too, because some of them want that travel. Like, I don't know. I don't know that there's a way to make it fair, but I think we need to be conscious of it. So as we kind of look to wrap up here, Kyle, I think one of the things that I would say as an imperfect inspired action is, I think as a leader or as an employer, this is something that you need to bring to your attention, and maybe try DePaulo's tactic here of replace what you're saying with something else, and see if you feel gross about it, in which case, you know, you may be discriminating. And I think just being conscious to it, it's like, you know, it's like, I don't want to ask this person first because they're single. Am I asking them first because they're single? Right. Or vice versa. Am I asking because they're married with kids, or am I giving a higher exception because they have kids at home, you know, which negates the mental health issues of somebody who's literally been isolating for nearly 2 years with no contact, and because they don't live with anybody, like, you know, they don't actually have a family to have support with. There's nobody in their house supporting them. So the other thing I would say is, if you are that single person, I think you need to decide what kind of life you want to have. So don't say, well, I'm single and I can do this, if you're uncomfortable doing it. Your appointment to go to yoga or to your doctor's, or to just sit on your butt and watch TV, if that's what your appointment is just as important. And certainly in our country, we're lucky enough that you do not have to disclose. You can just simply say, it won't be possible for me. I have an appointment this evening.
Yeah,
right? and that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, and the third thing I would add to that, and final comment, is just, engage the other person, right? Just find out, what do you usually like to do? And hopefully before you need them, right? So it's one of those things where if you're engaged in this conversation before Christmas, so by June, July, or whatever, you're saying to someone, hey, I'm actually curious, what do you usually do for your holidays? Like, understand that, because they may say, oh my God, the summers are all it for me. And for you, you may be like, wow, I prefer to work in the summer. So then you could maybe work on a trade-off, so to speak, that's valuable, instead of starting the conversation, hey, you don't have a family. Because think about how that sounds too, like you were saying, right? It's like, yeah, I don't need to be reminded that I'm single, or I may not need to be reminded that I don't have a family, because I love being single, but for some people, they may struggle with that.
The thing is though, Kyle, I think that it's more passive than that. I think it's unconscious bias, and people don't realize that they're actually making decisions based off of somebody's marital status. Yeah. Like, I really do believe that. I think it's unconscious. I really do. It's just like, and then the question is like, do you answer the question? Like, if you're having a casual conversation with somebody and they're like, oh, do you have kids, Christopher? It's like, well, no, but I don't know that I want to tell you that. Like, right. Because it's like, what are you going to do with that information once you know? Like, and I know most of the time it's innocent, right? I know most of the time it's innocent, but every piece of information starts to form a picture in somebody's mind, and people form like everybody on here. If you want to know what this is like, you ever been in that position with your parents where they still think you're that teenager because you're responding to something in a certain way, and they feel like they have to parent or whatever? This is exactly it. Your parents have an unconscious bias because they saw you growing up. You also have an unconscious bias about them because of who they were when you were a teenager or a child, right? And so this is the same thing. Everything we know about someone starts to form a picture, and we create unconscious bias. So I think it's just really important to speak up for yourself and find those words, and just, and it's, I think simple is better, right? It's just like, no, I won't be able to commit to that tonight. I have plans, or I won't, it's like, I won't be able to, it won't be possible for me. I've got an appointment.
Yeah. Or right? It won't be possible.
Won't be possible. Yeah.
So folks, thank you for listening to another exciting week. We're always curious about hearing about your imperfect inspired action. So use our social media. We're really trying to focus this year on building a community and a following. So share, like, subscribe, do what you need to do.
We need those 10,000 followers.
Yeah, 10,000. That's exactly the goal.
10,000 likes,
downloads. Yeah, 10,000 downloads we want for this year. So we'll see you next week. Take care. Goodbye.
The people want updates. You need to give them up.
We're close. 3825.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We're out of time.
It's our goal to build a global community of inspired action takers, and we can only do that with your help. So if you love inspired action, please leave a review on your favorite podcasting app and share us on your socials. You've heard from us. Now we want to hear from you. Go to inspiredactionpodcast.ca and tell us, what is the inspired action you took this week? Next week on Inspired Action for Imperfect Humans.
When it comes to culture, I think often employees forget the role that they play in contributing to that culture. And if you're complaining about it and you're not kind of leading the way with it, then you're as much a part of the problem as your leadership is.